Join us in the fight to restore liberty and American exceptionalism. Together, let's make the case that our charters of freedom are worth defending and honoring. Right here is where the great American experiment comes alive. Let's get to work.
It's my pleasure to welcome Mr. Shane Krauser.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, thanks so much for having me. It's an honor to be here. And I knew I was in the right place when I pulled into the parking lot and saw a bumper sticker that said, "An American voting for Obama is like a chicken voting for Colonel Sanders." I knew I was in the right place. And of course, I teach back at the college back in Arizona. I've been teaching constitutional law and criminal law for about 10 years now. And I had a few students that approached me not too long ago and told me that they had made a decision as a community to change the name of Obama. They changed his name to Walking Bird. And I said, "Walking Bird?" He said, "Yes, Walking Bird. The guy is so full of crap, he can no longer fly." That is it. There you have it. So I was a prosecutor for 12 years, and I left about a year ago. And I have to tell you, one of the things that happened to me right before I left the office, I think epitomizes what's going on in America today. I was doing a jury trial, and during the jury selection process, there's a lot of bantering that goes on, there's a lot of questioning that goes on. And at one point during the trial, as we're selecting these jurors, the judge began doing something that was illegal. And that was dismissing jurors for cause in their presence. And a challenge for cause is this. It means that the parties, and is ultimately concluded by the judge, that that particular juror cannot be fair and impartial. And if a decision is made that a juror can't be fair and impartial for that particular case, they are removed. And so the judge started removing these jurors in the presence of other jurors. That is illegal in Arizona. And so I approached the judge and simply said that I objected to what was going on. And the judge says, "Mr. Krauser, let's quit playing games. Let's move on with this trial. Let's get the show on the road. And why don't you go back and have a seat?" And I said, "Judge, actually, I'm not going to go have a seat because the rules don't allow you to do what you're doing." And as I opened up the rule book, she says this, "Mr. Krauser, take your little rule book, go sit back down, let's get this trial underway or I will hold you in contempt." And I said, "Judge, all I'm asking is just as you demand that we follow the rules, so must you follow the rules." Now, this is precisely what's going on in America today. It's just a little rule book. Individuals in government decide that they're going to make the decision as to when it should apply and when it should be ignored. And we saw this go on just recently at the State of the Union address, didn't we? We had a president, the most powerful man in the world, stood up for the State of the Union address, and what did he say? Well, he said a number of things, but about 8 minutes into the speech, he began talking about working with Congress. And he made it clear that if Congress would not work with him, he would move forward unilaterally without their assistance. So he said he would move forward unilaterally if they would not work for them. Now, did you see what happened after he made that comment? There were at least 100 people that stood up and applauded him. They gave him an ovation. And I sat there and I've watched it over and over and over because I still can't believe it, that you had at least 100 members of Congress, probably more, that stood up and applauded a man who said, "If you will not work with me, I will steal your power from you." Thank you. These are individuals who clearly don't understand the parameters of authority, separation of power, division of authority, and ultimately what their function is. These are individuals who have taken an oath. And that oath right now means nothing to them. It means nothing to them because we don't require that it means something to them. They get to keep their jobs, they get to make lots of money, even when they violate the oath. And if you read Article 1, Section 1 of the Constitution, this is very, very important. It just boggles my mind that you have individuals that have taken the oath that haven't read the first paragraph aside from the preamble of the Constitution. Note Sheila Jackson Lee. Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, just days after the State of the Union, created what she called the Full Employment Caucus with one specific focus in mind: to put together executive orders for the president to sign. I'll tell you what, if they don't boot her out of office, that's an incredible indictment on we as Americans. That she is saying, I can't get it done constitutionally, so I will violate my oath to ensure that the president can accomplish an agenda, which, what does it ultimately come down to? Thomas Sowell said it best: these people are concerned about two things, elections and re-elections. They're not concerned about their oath. And it was Sheila Jackson Lee that said what? This should be our number one priority. Our number one priority should be creating these executive orders for the president to sign. Well, I happen to disagree. I think the number one objective and priority in Washington, D.C. should be keeping your oath of office, doing what it is that the Constitution outlines. And if you look at Article 1, Section 1, all legislative powers herein granted are vested in Congress, made up of the House and the Senate. Note the words, number one, all. All legislative powers herein granted are vested in Congress. In other words, the president has no legislative power. All of the power that they've been given to legislate even at all is outlined specifically in Article 1, Section 8. But these are people that are saying, we'll give the power to him. We'll give it to him. We'll let him bypass the Constitution, and we'll violate our oath in the process. And in case they didn't read Article 1, Section 1, there's also a 10th Amendment, which is the matching bookend, that makes it very clear. Those powers that we haven't given to you guys, you don't have. It's a double whammy, but we have individuals in office that simply don't understand the parameters of their authority. And it's tragic what's going on. And a lot of this has to do with the notion that the Constitution is an outdated document. We're being told that it's archaic, it's outdated, it's evil. Well, you know what I say about this? Let's have the debate. Let's have the debate with the other side that says this is an archaic document, because this document is more relevant today in 2014 than it was in 1788 when it was ratified. And here's why. The Constitution was founded upon two immovable pillars. Very simple. Men and women are born free, and men and women with power cannot be trusted. That's the essence of our Constitution. That's the reason why we limit power. We limit power to maximize freedom and limit tyrannical impulses within a culture. But we've lost sight of that. We say, oh, the Constitution's outdated, it's archaic. Men and women with power are benevolent. History proves that they're benevolent. They're looking out for the better good of society. Nothing could be further from the truth. Human nature does not change, and our founders recognized that human nature does not change. So let's have the debate on this Constitution being outdated. Let's talk about this, because you know what? If we have the debate on whether or not the Constitution is outdated, we win this debate every time. We win it every time. I was on a radio program, this was about a year and a half, I was a guest on a program, and someone called in and said, you know, I'm listening to this Mr. Krauser guy, and he's a clown. He talks just about the Constitution to the point where it's just nauseating. Mr. Krauser, it's time to move on. It's time to get with the times. The Founding Fathers could have never anticipated what it is that we're experiencing in 2013. And I said, I let him go on, because this is the guy I want. This is the guy I want a piece of. This is the guy I want to debate. And so I let him ramble on. And then I asked him this simple question. Tell me where. Tell me where in the Constitution it's outdated. Is it the 13th Amendment that abolishes slavery? Or maybe it's the 15th Amendment that says all individuals have a right to vote regardless of race. Or maybe you're talking about the 19th Amendment that says all individuals are permitted to vote regardless of gender. Or maybe it's the 14th Amendment that says equal protection under the law. That is, government cannot choose who it will protect and who it will harass. It must provide and execute the law equally across the board. Is that what you're saying is outdated? Well, maybe it's the 8th Amendment then. You know, the 8th Amendment says when the government decides to punish you, that they cannot utilize a punishment that would constitute cruel and unusual measures. In other words, humanity in the way that we treat our own people. Is that the outdated component? Or maybe it's this 6th Amendment nonsense. You know, that thing when the government decides to mount their resources against you, you have a right to a fair trial and a public trial and a speedy trial, and the right to confront your witnesses and the right to have counsel assist you through the process. Is that outdated? Or maybe it's this, the 5th Amendment, the right to remain silent. That is, government can't compel you to help them build their case. Is that what's outdated here? Or maybe it's the 4th Amendment, my favorite, the right to be left alone. The right to be left alone. Is that what's outdated? Or maybe, just maybe, it's that crazy 2nd Amendment, you know, says I have a right to defend myself and my family and my loved ones, and also defend myself against a tyrannical government. Or maybe it's the 1st Amendment. Maybe it's the 1st Amendment you say is outdated. You know, that silly freedom of speech stuff, freedom of assembly, free exercise of religion, the right to petition the government for redress of grievances. Is that what you're suggesting is outdated? Tell me where. I'm listening. Well, let me interrupt you one more time. Articles 1 through 7 of the Constitution, that body of the Constitution, which says you must limit what those in power do, or else they'll run roughshod over your liberty. So you tell me where it's outdated. And I listened. And what was the response? It was a dial tone. It was a dial tone. They don't want to have this debate because they know they will lose. They like to throw out the sound bites and the cliches and the punchlines. We want to have the debate. We must go on the offensive in 2014. We know that this country is on the brink of disaster. We've got to stop playing defense. And when I talk about defense, you know what I'm talking about. The last time you got involved in a debate on immigration, happens all the time down in Arizona. You get involved in this debate on immigration, and what's the accusation that comes your way? You racist. And you know what we conservatives do? We defend the idea that we're not a racist. Why are we defending the idea that we're not a racist? They know that that's the most vile accusation that can be made towards we as conservatives. They know that. And they know that it's a diversion. It's an absolute diversion. So let's turn the tables. If they want to talk about racism, let's talk about racism. Let's talk about their racist policies. You know, affirmative action. Let's talk about their racist policies, you know, where the minority communities are disproportionately impacted by foreclosure rates, unemployment. Let's talk about how they're a racist. We're not the racist. We're the ones who say equal protection under the law. That is, the government doesn't get to choose by virtue of someone's color who they will protect, who they will harass, and who they will give my money to. They don't get to decide those things. And we were, many of you probably heard about this SB 1062 that just went down in Arizona. It was a religious protection bill, religious freedom protection bill that happened out in Arizona. It was an absolute shame. I stood strong on behalf of that bill because of what the U.S. Supreme Court has done to the Free Exercise Clause of the First Amendment. They absolutely castrated the Free Exercise Clause. And you have a few states, 19 at this point, that have stepped up to adopt religious freedom restoration acts. The federal government has done it as well in response to the U.S. Supreme Court decision. And you know what happened after this law went through and it was put on the governor's desk? She ultimately vetoed it. Shame on her. But what happened was the other side showed up on the Capitol steps and they started yelling and screaming, "You homophobes, you bigots." And you want to know what the Republican legislature did back in Arizona? They ran for the hills. They were a bunch of cowards. It's a shame. We weren't expecting this backlash, so they said, so we won't defend it. We'll wait until the timing is better. I have a question. When is a good time to defend liberty? It's always a good time to defend liberty. It's not when the individuals show up and they intimidate you and you say it's not a good time. The time to defend liberty is even when the times are tough, even when you feel like you're in the minority. This is our nation to save. It's our liberty to preserve. And if we're going to protect it, we've got to stand strong.